Hey everybody. Are we on? No. That's okay. Welcome to Door County Reads 2025. And an afternoon in the Cerulean Sea with TJ Klune. I'm Alan Kavishki, and I don't know about you, but this is my 18th Door County Reads kickoff. I'm going to start off with a land acknowledgement. The Door County Reads Committee acknowledges the original peoples and primary caretakers of this peninsula from time immemorial. The Potawatomi, Menominee, Ho-Chunk, Odawa, Ojibwe, Petun, Huron, and Sauk peoples. The land we stand on today is part of the ancestral and historical homelands of each of these nations. We pay respect to these roots, connections, and the traditional ecological knowledge that is present and vital today. May we appreciate those who came before us and commit to partnering with and learning from First Nations today and into the future. We are honored to share this time together. See, I didn't need that to begin. So, a lot of you may have heard me go through this spiel many times before, but I'll try to keep it fresh. But there are some things that I think are important to remind ourselves of every year. Are we back on? Okay. Hi. This program began as a collaboration between Peninsula Players Theater and Door County Library. In 2007, the Players Board came to me and charged me with developing programming that would connect with this community in the off-season. And I came back to them with this very ambitious proposal for a National Endowment for the Arts program called The Big Read. And to their credit, they went all in. And we got funding, and we got partners, and we got audience. And it became clear that this community was hungry for this kind of program. So the first 3 years, it was produced by Peninsula Players under the umbrella of the National Endowment for the Arts in partnership with Door County Library. And then after that, Door County Library took over the read. But I think it's important to acknowledge the early support of the NEA, the Peninsula Players Board of Directors, Becca Berger, who was then the director of Door County Library, the Friends of Door County Libraries, Door County Community Foundation, the Great Brook Foundation, Door County Medical Center, MMG Foundation, and numerous program partners who joined us early on. Thousands have been enriched by their reading and the related activities while continuing to build and strengthen the bonds of our community. And every year, Friends of Door County Libraries purchases hundreds of books to distribute free to the community. Thank you, friends. We have had local luminaries like the late great Nord Bly, former Lieutenant Governor Barbara Lawton, extraordinary artists from Peninsula Players, Peninsula Music Festival, Third Avenue Playworks, and artists from all across the peninsula and the island. And they've been joined by national literary and other experts like David Kippen, who was then the national director of the Big Read, award-winning national artists like Ricky Ian Gordon and James DeVita, university professors, other experts, as well as many of the authors of the books. Emily St. John Mandel, Michael Perry, Lori King, William Kent Krieger, Kaukalia Yang, Dan Egan, Peter Guy, Lee Wenger, Andrew J. Graff, Robin Kimber, some of them virtual, but many of them in person. Unfortunately, John Steinbeck, Willa Cather, Carson Keller, Twain, all rudely refused our invites. I am not speaking. I remain proud of the fact that this community incorporates the arts and a variety of arts disciplines to a greater extent than any other community that I'm aware of. And I believe that that is central to the popularity and longevity of Door County Reads. 3 to 4 play readings every year? It's amazing. And at Peninsula Players, we eventually grew that part into the winter play reading series, The Play's the Thing. 20 books in 18 years, hundreds of events engaging thousands of readers. I recognize a bunch of people who helped start this. Dominic is going to thank a bunch of people for support specifically for this year. But Door County Reads wouldn't still be around if it weren't for the readers and event participants right here in this room. So thank you. And now I'd like to introduce the Director of Door County Libraries, Dominic Frandrup.
Thanks, Alan, and thanks to all of you for joining us here today for an afternoon in the Cerulean Sea. I can't tell you how thrilled I am that you are all here with us today. I really want to say that we are recording today, so if you are one of those people that swore that you had your cell phone silenced, please check again. After our conversation today, we are having a book signing with some Alpha Bay booksellers. I want to thank them very much for having all those copies available. And I want to invite you to a couple upcoming Door County Reads events. Tuesday, January 21st at 5:30 is a close-up magic show with David Watkins, and that's going to be at the Sister Bay Liberty Grove Library. Saturday, January 25th from 2:30 to 4:30, there's going to be some family fun and games with the Sturgeon Bay Library, courtesy of the Noshery. You'll be able to try out some board games and get an intro to Dungeons and Dragons if you're so inclined. And Sunday, January 26th at 2 o'clock at the Egg Harbor Library, Press Pavilion, is going to be a conversation on LGBTQ history presented by the Wisconsin LGBTQ History Project. That's sponsored by PFLAG of Door County, Open Door Pride, and Northern Door Pride. We have also about 30 more events, so if you haven't picked up our entire flyer, that is right at the entrance. Also, don't forget to sign up for the door prize. And if you happen to miss all of those, please follow the Door County Library on social media and check out our website. I want to thank our title sponsor for Door County Reads, the Door County Library Foundation, without whose support we would not be here today, and Door County Reads would not be able to continue. So I want to be very grateful for all those committee members on that board. I also want to thank, again, the Friends of the Door County Libraries for the over 500 copies that you all have hopefully read before coming tonight or this afternoon. And if you haven't, there's lots of opportunities for a myriad of book clubs to discuss House in the Cerulean Sea and or Somewhere Beyond the Sea. You have various locations around the county in the next month. And I want to thank the El Trusa International of Door County for the large print copies distributed for all of our library book clubs. So thank you to them as well. I also want to make sure I thank Heidi and Spencer at the Sturgeon Bay High School for hosting today's event. Again, we could not do this without them. I don't know where we'd be, probably sitting around outside. All right, I know you all are waiting. Today we have with us Jerod Santek, the founding and artistic director of Right On Door County. The very first program that Right On held was a Door County Reads book discussion for the memory of Old Jack in January of 2014. He's been involved with Door County Reads ever since and is a member of the Door County Reads committee. Thank you very much, Jerod. And the person that you are all here to see today is TJ Klune. You know? TJ is a New York Times best-selling author for House in the Cerulean Sea and its sequel, Somewhere Beyond the Sea. In 2020, his first novel with Tor Publishing was The House in the Cerulean Sea, where it won an Alex Award for its special appeal to young adults aged 12 to 18. In one of his online interviews, Mr. Klune said, "Libraries quite literally saved my life as a kid." And he further explained that he was quote, the loudmouth queer kid with ADHD, and every day would go to the library to read. I want to just say, TJ, I am so happy that the libraries were there for you when you needed them, and that you are here today for the libraries. Thank you.
So a couple of things, if you don't mind, before we get started. I curse a lot. If you find that offensive, I'm sorry. Not really, but no harms. Also, it's fucking cold. Now look, where I'm from, it is also very cold. I live in the Cascade Mountains in Washington State. But we don't normally see negative signs from the weather. Y'all okay? You doing okay? That's right? Yeah? Okay. Because I get to go home tomorrow. But thank you all so much for having me here. It's absolutely wonderful to see all of you. And now I'll shut up and let this get started.
Well, thank you, Dominic and Ellen, for introducing. Thank all of you for being with us, and I'm so honored to be in conversation with you. Can you all hear me okay if I leave this in the stand? Because I like to write and talk. So I just want to start by saying that I have to confess that I feel a bit like Linus Baker when he got to the steering station and opened up the folder of the cases that he'd be investigating and thought,
Because I'm the Antichrist? Is that what we're saying? I mean, okay.
Yes. No, when Dominic approached me about doing this interview, this was months ago, I was like, I don't know, let me think about it. I don't really read fantasy. And I know that from comments that the library has gotten, that there were a lot of people out there who were like, well, I'll try this book, but I don't read fantasy. And then as I'm reading it, I was like, why are they calling this a fantasy? All good novels are part fantasy, part mystery, part romance. Are we limiting books by the labels that we put on them? Have you ever felt that you were in any way limited by how your books are marketed?
That is a very good first question. I'll talk about Chauncey, he's my favorite. But yes, because I have thoughts. Okay. Just remember, you asked for this. So, look, in 2020, when The House in the Cerulean Sea came out, it came out on March 17th of 2020. Okay. Do y'all remember what happened that week? For those who need a refresher, that was the week the pandemic exploded in the United States. Okay. Now imagine that it's 2019 and you've been given that date, March 17, 2020, as the release date of your first big traditionally published book, and you're going on your first ever national book tour. Now we're back in 2020, and it's the Thursday before the book comes out. And you get a phone call from a New York City area code, and you think, hell yeah, that's my publisher, hot shit right here, that's how I do. And you pick it up and they say, hey, have you heard of this thing called COVID? I'm like, yeah, what does that have to do with me? Like, well, we don't know what's going to happen, so your book tour is canceled. And also everybody who's on tour, their book tours are being canceled, they're being sent home, but your book still comes out next week, so good luck. And so I remember thinking, aw, nuts. Well, and it's very, very different words, I'll be quite honest. And when this book came out, it did come out on March 17th of 2020, I thought it was going to get swallowed up by the storm of the necessary storm that was the pandemic. Because if you all remember at the time, a lot of you were going out and buying all the toilet paper you could find, and then coming home and wiping it down with like Windex or whatever. And I was sitting here going, hey, do you want to read a book about kindness and the Antichrist? But something funny happened. I think about it often. Is it something, especially before the sequel came out, I was thinking about it often. Is it something that people are looking back on with rose-tinted glasses? Because at the time, when that book came out, there was nothing quite like it. And it gave people comfort, and it gave people a place to escape. And then that was very amazingly followed up by Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldree, which is a wonderful book. And it just kept building and picking up steam. It kept picking up steam until 8 months after the book came out, it debuted on the New York Times bestseller list on January 6, 2021. Y'all remember what happened on that day? Yeah. So, I want you to imagine being me on that day and watching the TV, as everybody was. And then your editor calls and goes, hey, I know this might not be the best time, but you're a New York Times bestseller. And I was so like, yay, democracy. But I remember telling her, I can't talk about this now. Look what's going on. She goes, yeah, you're right. And then I immediately went and posted about it on social media. But here's the thing I've learned, is that through this time, people have found these characters to be something that they can turn to for hope and for peace and for again, an escape. Escapism doesn't necessarily need to be a pejorative. Escapism is something that I grew up with because I needed a place to escape to. Now, I do have some pushback on a specific term, cozy fiction. I am not going to be that forever. I'm not going to be, and look, when you have The House in the Cerulean Sea, I absolutely agree. That's what it is. Somewhere Beyond the Sea, absolutely. Under the Whispering Door, the book I wrote after, it deals with grief, it deals with loss, it deals with death. And that was considered cozy to some people. And I'm like, okay, you do you. And then In the Lives of Puppets came out, which was a retelling of Pinocchio through the eyes of one of the last human beings on Earth after the human race was eradicated, and people were like, oh, this is kind of cozy. But so look, cozy is a thing that I try. I never was necessarily comfortable. I never market my books as that. I can't say what a publisher does, but I can say that my publisher, after having many conversations with me, realized that term can feel kind of limiting at some point, because if you say, this person writes cozy books, what if their next book isn't that? And they're like, oh no, they lied to me. It isn't cozy at all. People died. It was terrible. I don't want to be pigeonholed into writing one type of book, which is why I don't. So I want to keep on trying to get better at certain things. But cozy, if that's what you want to call it, it's fine. I'm not going to push it. I don't necessarily call it that myself. Another thing that I found interesting is people call The House in the Cerulean Sea a young adult novel. Linus Baker is 40 years old. Most young adult novels that I read don't have middle-aged bureaucrats being their lead character. And I get why, because even in libraries, let's say everything needs to be filed in a certain place. It has to have a category, it has to fit into this book. I remember before the book came out, I went to a library convention called Winter Institute. And one of the librarians came up to me and goes, I love this book. I just don't know who it's for. And I remember going, oh, I mean, I guess it's for everybody, right? It's for everybody who wants to pick up the book. And that's how I describe this book and its sequel. The House in the Cerulean Sea, Somewhere Beyond the Sea, is for anybody who wants to read. That's what I wrote it for.
Okay. I want to ask, you referenced the characters, and I want to talk about them more a little bit later. But what comes to you first in writing? Is it the story, and then you develop the characters who are going to help tell that story or idea? Or do the characters come to you first, and you build a story around that character you've fallen in love with?
So, growing up, I had a choice. I could have either A, grown up to be a writer, or B, be psychotic. The reason being is because I hear voices in my head. I hear my characters talk to me. I hear them all the time. And the louder they get, the more I know there's going to be a story there. There's been times when it's just felt like whispers, and then they just went away, and that didn't turn into anything. Or you could all of a sudden start hearing the 6-year-old Antichrist in your head and be like, oh, is there a story there with this character named Lucy? And then it keeps expanding beyond that, because I knew Lucy wasn't going to be the main character, so I built out from there. I am a very character-driven author first. To me, if the characters don't leap off the page, whether they be, in a fantastical setting, in a contemporary setting, whether it be in a Western, in a horror, I have to feel something for the characters, whether it be love, hate, rejoice, contempt, whatever. If the characters don't feel real, then the story doesn't work. At least that's how I think of my writing. So I always go character first, and then I build the story around the characters. Do I have ideas for the story while I'm building these characters? Yeah, absolutely. I'm just fitting them within the framework of the world that I'm building.
Well, and these characters definitely leap off the page and come alive for the readers.
Yeah, try hearing them in your head all the time. But not just the way I made them. Imagine if you listen to the audiobook. If you listen to the audiobook, you know that Daniel Henning does a masterful job in the audios. But I want you to imagine it's Daniel Henning's take on the characters in your heads at all time. And imagine if one of those was Chauncey the whole time. Because he's in my head and it won't go away. Please help me. Somebody seriously help me.
Well, speaking of the characters, and you're talking about Lucy, and I brought my peanuts water bottle here, because a couple of the questions that were submitted in advance for this was, how intentional was naming the characters Linus and Lucy?
Well, did you know that Helen's name in the book, the mayor of Marcy's, her name used to be Sally? Why? I don't know. It wasn't until editing that my editor, this is our first book working together, my editor, she goes, "You really like Charlie Brown, huh?" And I said, "What?" "No more, no less than normal people, I guess." Why? She goes, "Well, aren't you naming the characters?" I was like, what? So I immediately, but I couldn't change Linus because he's Linus to me, and I couldn't change Lucy because Lucifer, that's funny. Come on. So I wouldn't change Sally. That way. So yes, that was absolutely unintentional, but I did have a Charles Schultz brainworm apparently at some point. I'm so glad when people pick up on that, because I'm like, yeah, this is embarrassing. I'm a Charlie Brown mega stan. What?
I ask you also the choice for the music that's in the book.
Mm-hmm.
So it's all of this time, late 50s period music. We know that the setting isn't the 50s. I think one of the wonderful things about the novels, we're never really sure what time it's taking place in, but we know it's not at that time because it's referred to as oldies music, and Lucy calls it dead people's music, and it's interesting that like most of those artists had tragic young deaths, except for Little Richard. So as I'm thinking about it, it was like, well, the music is evoking this time that was supposed to be happy and everyone thought was this nice, peaceful thing, but there were all this stuff boiling up under that happy facade. It's kind of like the seaside town there. Was the music an intentional choice of yours, or was that just music that you love and you wanted to get it into a book?
No, most of the music was very intentionally chosen because of A, either the feeling they evoked, the music itself, or B, the singers specifically. And you were right, because you were talking specifically about the day the music died, which is when Buddy Holly and the Big Bopper died in a plane crash in a plane that they weren't even supposed to be on, and they were all in their young 20s. They were 20 years old. You had these huge, amazing talents that by rights could still be alive today and probably performing in Las Vegas or something like that, but they could still be alive today, and it's tragic. That's the tragedy of the limelight, I guess, is that so much was put upon them, and then one little twist of fate, and all of a sudden they were gone. And I love how that kind of, there's an eeriness behind that. And plus, when you add that on top of the fact that, look, when you go online now or you open your music app and you listen to a song, that song is produced within an inch of its life. It is the most perfect sound that you could possibly imagine. There's not even a hint of friction or anything. It's exactly how it's supposed to be. But when you go back and listen to records have imperfections. They have scratches. They have a very specific cadence and tone. and it sounds like ghosts. It sounds like dead people music. And that's what I love. I love records. I'm one of those people that nerdily has way too many of them, and a record player that I probably should have spent money on something else for, but I wanted it, so I got it. But I love that kind of music because it does evoke a certain sensation in me. Don't get me wrong, I love new music. I'm in the Pink Pony Club, whatever. But I love listening to older music because it's so perfectly imperfect.
I wanted to ask, I recently heard a novelist say during an event that this is where writers live, between unbearable and remarkable. So the idea being that we take something horrific and make something beautiful, which is what you did with this book, taking these stories that you discovered on Wikipedia of these Indigenous Canadian children being torn from their families and put in these homes to assimilate them, and you created a beautiful novel.
Let's hold on right there. Let's go a little bit in a certain direction. That was when I was researching orphanages. I came up, you would look upon what the history of orphanages were, because I wanted to see what these buildings were like. And when you start with a place like Wikipedia, that's great because it has everything collated in a datum. But what the best part about Wikipedia is the footnotes. Where each
Oh no, my words.
Hello? Okay, good. Where you can find the sources and where everything comes from. So yes, when looking this up, I came across something known as the 60 Scoop, which was where Indigenous children were taken from their homes. What goes on further beyond that, though, is that when you research into that occurred in almost every civilized country in the world. At the time I was writing this book in 2017, guess what was going on? What in the fudge and crackers? At the time in 2017 when I was writing this book, guess what was going on? We were separating children at the border from their parents at the border of Mexico. Hi.
He needs to unmute that one.
Oh.
Hello. Okay, cool. Thank you guys so much. She's like, unmute it, you idiot. You mean the button that says mute? Anyways, that is happening all over the world. It happened all over the world. So rather than take from any individual experience, I just put it in the fact that these orphanages were built to house what was considered to be dangerous, and including different, but also the idea of danger. Because what comes with that for that idea of danger? It's this fear of the unknown. It's fear of things that are different from us. It is a fear of things that we don't understand. Some people have a problem using that word fear, but isn't that really what it is? Is that if you don't understand something and you're bigoted towards it, isn't that showing that you're scared of learning what it's actually about and what's going on? So when I was building the story and crafting it from the ground up, I made sure that I did my research. In addition to researching about orphanages and the atrocities that were committed the world over, I talked to social workers. I talked to teachers. I talked to people whose jobs it is to work with children. I talked to parents who fostered. I talked to people who have been fostered and adopted, because that is how you get the full experience. So once you start with an idea and then you expand the scope of that idea and make sure you're doing all of the necessary research that is important to your idea, that's how the story can come to be out of something like that.
How that all came to be. With there were, as you can see from my copy of the book, a few passages that would be great for you to read. So
Yeah.
we're not going to read all these tab pages, but I did want to ask you.
Could you try again?
Oh no, you're coming for us, run. You are all the last survivors of humanity.
It was turned off. I did want to ask you if you would read a passage that
Oh, yeah.
This is Linus is testifying to extremely upper management after coming back from the island, and this is a great introduction to the characters if you're not familiar, if you haven't read the book.
I did bet this front row didn't know they get such a late show. And gays, yes. Just noticed that most of y'all were the ladies. Of course, sir. Let's see what we were starting on page. Okay. As written, okay. There seemed to be some dysfunction. Okay, here we go, guys. That's good now. So before I do any reading, I always preface my reading by saying this. If you want to hear the absolute best version of this being read, please listen to the audiobook. Audio narrators are amazing, wonderful people and deserve to be celebrated. If you have not done yourself the favor of listening to Daniel Henning perform these characters, then I suggest that you listen, and therefore you too can have Chauncey stuck in your head for the rest of your freaking lives. Okay. As written in the rules and regulations, a caseworker must be objective. I know that, and I have been. I remember them, all of their names, the hundreds of them that I've observed, and I've maintained my distance. I put up that wall. Can you say the same? What are the names of the children on the island? Without looking down at whatever notes you have, what are their names? Giles coughed. This is ridiculous. Of course we know their names. There's the Antichrist child. Do not call him that, Linus growled. That is not who he is. Charles had a smug grin on his face. It's Lucy, a rather ridiculous nickname for what he is. And? Linus asked. The other 5? Silence. Talia, a gnome who loves to garden. She is fierce and funny and brave. She is prickly. But once you get past it, there is a loyalty underneath that will take your breath away. And after all that she has been through, after all that was taken from her, she still finds joy in the smallest of things. The woman said, Mr. Baker, you should fee the forest sprite. She acts tough and distant, but all she ever wanted was a home. She was found in squalor because her kind had been sectioned off without aid. Did you know that? Did you even read her report? Because I did. Her mother starved to death right in front of her, and Fee herself nearly died. And yet, when men came to the camp to try and take her from her mother's body, she managed to turn them into trees with the last ounce of her strength. The forests on the island are thick because of her, and they would do anything to protect those she loved. She taught me about roots and how they can be hidden away, waiting for the right moment to burst through the earth and change the landscape. Extremely upper management remained silent as Linus began to pace. Theodore, a wyvern, one of the few that remained. Did you know he can talk? Do any of you know that? Because I didn't. I'd never been told. None of us had. But he can. Oh, he doesn't speak in English, but he talks just the same. And if you listen long enough, if you give him the time, you will begin to understand him. He is not an animal. He is not a predator. He has complex thoughts and feelings and buttons. So many buttons. Linus reached down to his coat pocket and felt the brass button inside, indented with sharp teeth. Chauncey, well, no one quite knows what he is, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because he might be more human than any of us. He's been told his whole life that he is a monster, that he is the thing that hides beneath beds, that he is a nightmare. That can't be further from the truth. He is a curious little boy who has a dream, and my God, how simple it is. How breathtakingly lovely. He wants to be a bellhop. He wants to work at a hotel and greet people and carry their luggage, and that is it. But would any of you allow it? Would any of you give him the opportunity? They didn't respond. Sal, Linus growled, abused and neglected, shuffled around without a care for his well-being because of what he is capable of. He bit a woman, yes, and he turned her, yes, but she hit him. She struck a child. If you raise your hand enough, they will cower, but every now and then they will strike back because that's all they have left. He is shy and quiet, and he worries about everyone more than he worries about himself, and he writes, oh Lord, he writes the most beautiful words. They are poetry. They are a symphony. They move me more than anything else I've ever heard. And what of the last child? The woman asked quietly. Lucy, Linus said. His name is Lucy, and he has spiders in his brain. He dreams of death and fire and destruction, and it tears at him. But you know what I found? I found a 6-year-old boy who loves going on adventures, who has the wildest imagination. He dances, he sings, he lives for music, and it moves through him like the blood in his veins. Regardless of whether or not you like to hear it, Giles said, he is still the reason, he is still what he is. That can never change. It can't? I refuse to believe that. We are who we are, not because of our birthright, but because of what we choose to do in this life. It cannot be boiled down to black and white, not when there is so much in between. You cannot say something is moral or immoral without understanding the nuances behind it. Thank you.
Characters are so endearing. In several interviews that you conducted after the book came out, you said that you expected that Lucy would be the reader's favorite character. And I want to ask the audience, I don't know if we'll be able to see your hands, but just by a show of hands, how many was Lucy the favorite?
Oh, it gets less and less as time goes on. Raise your hand if your favorite person was Chauncey. Yeah, Chauncey boys! Just kidding.
Well, I have to say Chauncey was my favorite. It sounds like...
Oh, he's my absolute favorite. He's the whole reason a sequel exists. Because one day he decided to wake back up and then he did not go back to sleep. And then he kept on talking to me, and so then I had to write a sequel.
Now, this may be, you've probably gotten some odd questions during your time of interviewing. This might be among the oddest. Were you a Rudolph fan growing up?
Rudolph, the red-nosed reindeer?
The
animated? I mean, I watched it, not necessarily a fan. I think I was, can I be quite honest? I was deep into my Thundercats love at that point in time because I had decided that the leader of the Thundercats, Lion-O, and I would be boyfriends. So, not necessarily thinking, why, did I have another brainworm that I did not notice?
I was wondering because Chauncey was my favorite character, and so I'm a generation queer older than you. So
Yeah.
we really identified with that show with the Misfit. I think a lot of kids
Yeah,
who don't
right.
feel like they belong identify with that show in the Island of Misfit Toys. And my favorite Misfit toy was the pink spotted elephant, or the spotted elephant. And then as I was looking at holiday stuff this year, I realized that there's a scene in which the elephant is wearing a bellhop cap. Or calls him Footman. I was like, that's Chauncey!
It could be, you never know with the weirdest stuff. Well, I mean, hell, I wrote a book called In the Lives of Puppets, and the whole reason that book exists is because I bought a Roomba vacuum cleaner.
Inspiration is everywhere.
Yeah, I know, it's weird how weird things can happen like that. I don't know.
You have such an amazing output of work, and you were saying earlier that you write very quickly. And I think in some of the articles, interviews that I read, you've had as many as 3 or 4 books come out in a year. I wanted to...
Never again! Yes.
I wanted to read one of the questions that was submitted in advance for this from one of our participants. They wrote, "Hi, your books have really touched my queer neurodivergent heart. I'm wondering what tools or approaches to managing your time have worked for you as a self-employed person with ADHD. I'm early in my career, recently diagnosed, and wondering if working for myself one day is a realistic goal to set."
Thank you for that question. Absolutely. So I am a 42-year-old person with ADHD. what a lot of people don't understand is that ADHD doesn't go away when you get older. You're a kid with ADHD, you turn into a teenager with ADHD, and you turn into an adult with ADHD. That's just how it is. I was, unfortunately, I did not have a very good home life, so they would not take me to go get diagnosed. I did not get diagnosed until I turned 18, when I went myself. And it wasn't a surprise. I knew very much so that I was neurodiverse. But here's the thing, especially when you're working for yourself, in essence, self-employed. Before the House and the Sorority Sea even came out, I had already quit my full-time job in 2016 and had been writing full-time in those 4 years too. The reason I'm able to do it is because two things. One, part of my ADHD is hyperfixation, which means it's a good thing and a bad thing. But hyperfixation is when I find something that interests me, I want to learn everything I can about it. And think of it like being a kid and finding something neat and that becomes your entire personality. It doesn't become my entire personality, but it's something that I have to learn because I'm fascinated by something, so I have to learn about it. That's good because it helps me do research really well. It's also bad because there has to be a point when I stop doing research, but then, oh no, it's like 2 weeks later and I'm doing research on something completely different and I don't know how I got here, please help. And it's something that happens, it can happen, but for me, I told myself when I walked out of my cubicle hell job where I was a mid-level bureaucrat for a lizard company whose commercials you probably all know and despise. Yeah, if you got into a very bad car accident where you were really hurt or you killed someone or you were getting sued, guess who you called? Me, I was that guy. But I remember having a very big fear in 2016 when I left that job. I'd been there for 10 years, had full salary, full benefits, and then one of the big managers there said something horrible to me, which was, "You are very good at insurance." So I had to leave, obviously. So I quit, and I remember I left on a Friday. It was the very end of February 2016. And that Monday, I took that weekend to process, holy shit, I really did it. But I took that weekend to also realize I'm the only person now going forward who can hold me to account. If I fail, it's my fault. If I don't do what I set out to do, nobody else can stand behind me. I don't have a boss. I don't have somebody saying, this is do this, this is do this, this is do this. I have to do it on my own. And that's how you learn if you want it bad enough. Because I sat down on that Monday and began writing first thing in the morning. And then I continued for years after that, writing almost every single day while I was still self-publishing or independently published. And then when Tor came to call, I slowed down a little bit, but I have routine, which is the most important thing for a person like me. Your neurodiverse journey might be different, but for a person like me and how mine works, I have to have routine. And I stick to that routine. I absolutely stick to that routine. I am working from usually 7:30 in the morning till about 1 in the afternoon. And by working, I don't mean writing. I mean not just writing, but I'm also doing research. I'm also putting together outlines. I'm trying to figure out where I want to go in a specific thing. The writing of the book is the easiest part for me because I can do that in like 2-3 months. But I want to get to that point where when I start writing that book, that I don't have to stop. So routine is the most important thing to me, and the knowledge that if I screw up, there's nobody that's going to be like, "Oh, well, we got your back, TJ." If I stop releasing books or I start writing really crappy straight books, then that if I fail, that's on me. I am the person. Yes, I've had an incredible amount of luck to get where I'm at right now, but that doesn't negate the fact that I have had to work my butt off to get here, and it's a lot of work, but one that I wanted. My ADHD used to be a hindrance, now it's a weapon that I use at my disposal.
I want to be sure that we have time for questions from audience members, so I want to just ask you one final question for our portion of today. With acknowledging that today is Winnie the Pooh Day. I don't know if everyone here is aware that this is a Winnie the Pooh Day because it's Million's birthday. Wanted to ask who some of your favorite writers were when you were a child, and as was referenced in Dominic's introduction, the role that libraries or teachers, their influence on you.
So, as I've alluded to, and if you've heard me talk before, then you've probably heard at least parts of this. I grew up in a home that was not very good. I grew up in a home where I got made fun of for reading and writing, my love of that. I got made fun of for being more effeminate than the other boys. I got made fun of for being unable to sit down and stop moving and keep on talk. There's a very, very specific word that was used as a pejorative for most of my young life, and that word was weird. I heard that from teachers. I heard that from family. I heard that from friends. As a kid, and when you're a kid and you hear that word, it feels like it's you're being defined. You are being this weird person because people think you're weird. Now that I'm 42 years old, I'm like, hell yeah, I'm weird. What the hell, man? Like, I get to be weird because of my job. My job is being weird. But when I was a kid, I grew up in a place called Roseburg, Oregon, and at the time, its claim to fame was being the meth capital of the United States. And this place caused me a lot of trauma. I grew up in a physically and psychologically abusive household. And so what did I do during the summers? I would go to the library every day. And it's one of those stories that you hear about older people saying, I had to ride my bike into town 5 miles to go to the library, and that's true. I would ride my bike into town 5 miles every day just to go to the library. Because at the library, nobody was picking on me. Nobody was telling me what I could or couldn't do, and librarians were the best enablers because they fed my addiction to books. And it was wonderful to be able to do that. My librarian was the first person I came out to at age 16. And she was the first person to ever put a book with gay characters in my hands. Granted, it turned out to be a tragedy, but that's how that goes. But I did also want to touch on 2 different people for whom I owe everything and would not be here. And it ties into that tiny little small horrific town that I grew up in. In 7th grade, I met 2 women named Mrs. Benson and Mrs. Pfeiffer. They were my 7th grade English teachers. And they were the first people to ever tell me I was good at something, and that was writing. In my very last class with them, they told me one day they would see my name on a book in a bookstore. Now, Mrs. Benson and Mrs. Pfeiffer were older when I had them. They have since passed away. They passed away many years ago. I went back to that horrific hometown in 2023 with the release of my book, In the Lives of Puppets. I went to the very same library that saved my life and gave a presentation in front of 500 people from this tiny little broken town that had gotten better, but could never undo the trauma that I had while living there. And I told that story about Mrs. Benson and Mrs. Pfeiffer, not knowing that Mrs. Benson's son was in the audience. He came up to me afterwards and introduced himself, told me who he was, and he told me that ever since his mother passed away, he's heard nothing but stories like that about her. I am proof positive of what teachers and librarians can help young people grow up to be. Because without those 3 people, my librarian and Mrs. Benson and Mrs. Pfeiffer, I would not be here. So when you hear these stories now, in the news becoming more and more often about librarians and teachers being under attack as part of a culture war that they are not paid enough to be part of, or B, should not be focused on because their well-being should be the safety and learning and protection of the children that they're with. Yeah, I call it back because there's one enough. But listen to me. I mean, there are 3 groups of 3 groups of people I will go to war for, and those are teachers, nurses, and librarians, because those are the people that have helped me more than anything else. And again, if it were up to me, the librarians and teachers should be like the richest people in the world. Could you imagine the people that impart knowledge are the ones that get paid the most? Isn't that a crazy idea? Wouldn't it be crazy if a teacher could have a livable wage, or a librarian could have a livable wage and not have to worry about having any other jobs or anything on top of that? Wouldn't that be crazy? Wouldn't that be crazy? I mean, because to be a librarian, you have to get your master's degree to do all that. So wouldn't it be great if when they got their master's degree, you're like, here, you're set for life now. Go hang out with books, impart knowledge. But yeah, so libraries are obviously some of the most important things in the absolute world because they can, without a library, a community has no chance of survival. It does not have a backbone because libraries are not just places where people go to check out books. There are places where people can go to gather and meet other like kinds of people. There are places where you can go. Hell, my tiny little library where I live in a tiny little town in Washington has a full-on 3D printer. And if you don't think I'm going to go make weird crap with that, you have no idea what I'm capable of. But yes, that is why libraries mean so much to me. So, before we get to the questions, I want to tell you all one thing real quick. Because I want to speak specifically to the queer people that are here and sitting with the audience. It's very scary right now, especially if you're trans. It is absolutely one of the most frightening things in the world right now because all the people in charge seem to be saying that your lives are lesser and that we're not worth the same as everybody else. So I want to tell you something real fast. The best revenge queer people can have is to live happily and successfully. The best revenge queer people can have is to prove that we have always been here, that we will always be here, and nothing any of the small-minded bigots in this world can say can take that away. But sometimes, maybe a little bit more revenge is necessary. So I want to tell you a quick story about how I got revenge. So imagine you move to a tiny little town known for Christmas in the mountains of Washington. You get there and you live in a log cabin on 10 acres. Your house sits up on a very big hill and it looks down over my nearest neighbor. So what does one do, like myself, when you move into a house like that for the first time? You make it gay, obviously. So I put a pride flag right on my deck. Guess who can see my deck from his deck? My neighbor. Now remember, I have not met this neighbor. This neighbor has not introduced himself to me, but this is in the country, and you don't really do stuff like that in the country. If a neighbor came to introduce himself to me, I'd be like, who the hell are you and why are you here? What is this? But anyways, my handyman was leaving one day shortly after I put up that pride flag. My handyman does not know this neighbor either, except this neighbor stopped him, made him roll down the window, and said, what is that faggot up to up there? And then proceeded to spit some of the grossest vitriol you have ever heard, some of the grossest homophobia you have ever heard. Not to my face, but to my handyman's face, this really cool straight guy who proved he was an ally by immediately calling and tattling on the neighbor. I was like, oh, look at you, get right. So I didn't know how to react. I didn't know what to do. It's weird, this is my new home. This is where I want to live for the rest of my life. I love it here. Why do I have to deal with that, especially near my home? Is this a person that's going to escalate? If I'm walking my dog, is that person going to try to approach me and say something to me? Is he going to say something to someone else who maybe wants to escalate? You never know, right? People can be crazy. So what did I do? Found out that the house he was living in with his family was a rental. Found out his landlord was a real estate agent in California for a very big real estate company. Tagged the landlord and his real estate company on Instagram and asked him, why do you rent to homophobic people? I have never gotten a call from a realty agent so fast in my entire life than I got from that moment. I didn't name names. I didn't want to do that. All I said was, hey, such and such at this realty company, your neighbors are really, your tenants are really homophobic. So this guy called me and immediately apologized, saying, I don't know what is going on, what could happen. I didn't know they were like this or anything like that. I'm like, okay, sure, maybe you didn't, and that's cool, but now that you know, I'm not telling you to kick them out, because that's not good. You can't kick somebody out over something like that. What I told him was this, you know what? I'll let bygones be bygones. We can let this go. When you get back into town, come up with your neighbor and apologize. Come up with the neighbor to my house, knock on my door and apologize. Why would I want him to do that? Because I wanted to look him in the eye and tell him, hey, I see you have kids. Did you know that my books are being taught in elementary schools, middle schools, and colleges across the world? Did you know that there's a very good chance that your kid might come home one day with a book of mine in their hand and say, hey, Daddy, I heard this guy lives in Leavenworth. Can we go meet him? No, honey, we can't. Sorry. Daddy called him a faggot. So, that's what I wanted. That was it. I would have been willing to wipe the slate clean. The man said to his landlord, no, I just want to let this go. Now, every time I walk by their house with my dog, they all run inside every time they see me. Because apparently you can catch gay or whatever. But it gets better. Here's how I got revenge. You ready? Because that landlord decided a few months later, well, we don't want to move up there like we had planned. Do you want to buy their house? Do you want to buy the land around the house? And I had to weigh myself. Do I care so much about getting revenge that I become a landlord? So I said, no, I won't take the house, but I will take the land around it. So as of this April, I will be a landowner of the land around their house. And now if they stay in that house, if they decide to live in that house, they're going to have to look at pride flags all the way up and down the road. For the rest of their lives. Because once that land becomes mine, I'm putting pride flags all along the road. I'm going to bring in rainbow gravel rock and have it driven on the road. Why? Because I freaking can. And because I want them to be so uncomfortable when they stay there that every time somebody drives by their house and sees their big Trump flag hanging on the wall, they'll still be like, oh, well, at least they like gays. Revenge! Thank you.
From that scary woman talking to me. So we're just at 2 o'clock, so if there are questions that audience
Don't be
members have.
nervous. You can come up and ask a question. And remember, the first person that comes up and asks a question probably will start yelling for everybody else who's too nervous. So who's totally brave? Who's totally brave? This person right here is totally brave. You want to come up over here? Microphone. And guess what? For being totally brave, you get the first copy of my unreleased novel that has not yet come out. This comes out on February 4th. It's called The Hands Beneath My Skin. If you grew up in the era of the 80s and 90s where it was Escape from Witch Mountain and E.T. and thought, wow, that could be gayer. Yeah, what's that? Oh. Okay, no, go ahead.
It was not mute.
They do that by themselves. I don't know.
May I challenge you on something?
Yeah.
You said how it was by luck that you were able to write this book. You didn't get this by luck. You did it by hard work. You make choices every day. Every day we all have a choice how we want to live our life. You made a choice to write this book, and I applaud you for that. So I'm challenging you that it was luck. You made this happen.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. But I think it all comes down to the fact that also that so many people talked about the book when it came out. That was a big thing, is that what thing I've heard from so many people is, I wasn't going to read this book until my friend wouldn't shut up about it and made me read it. And I'm like, all right, I respect that. But I get what you're saying, and I appreciate that. That does it. I try. I try to be humble, but I've been awesome. Okay, you guys.
You are awesome, and this is a great topic to bring up. And you know, we're all connected. We're all one. And when people say weird, I prefer a word unique. We are all unique. None of us are alike. And shame on the people that want to put others down for being different. So kudos to you.
Thank you very much for saying so. I appreciate that. Hi, who's next? Who's got a question?
Yeah, we got one over here. Can you hear?
Yeah.
That's fine.
Given the atmosphere we've seen in many places of the country about book banning, has this book had problems being accepted in schools and libraries?
No, quite the opposite, and let me tell you why. This is just my own personal theory, but I'm a cis white dude. I'm a safe gay when it comes down to it. The books that are being banned, especially if you look at when the American Library Association releases their top 10 list of books that are banned, they are most likely by Black queer authors, or they are by trans authors. Every single book on there that is being pulled, that is, I mean, hell, it was in 2022, I think, that the American Library Association released their top 10 most banned books, and every single one of them was queer. But they weren't by white people. They were by marginalized communities. They were by trans authors. So no, my books do not get anywhere near that kind of attention because of that. I will say, though, that there was a tiny little town in Idaho where this right-wing fundamentalist religious group came into this tiny little town and had a list of books that they say were unsafe and unsuitable for children. One of those books, or three of those books, happen to be my young adult series, The Extraordinaries, which is about young adult queer people and superheroes and all of this kind of stuff. And this librarian took this list, looked at it and said, we don't actually have any of these books at our library. And you would think that, okay, then the people would go away, right? That they would go, okay, mission accomplished, hooray. No, they kept harassing the librarian to the point where she was receiving death threats at her home, so she quit, and the library closed, because there was nobody else there to have that. I need to use my platform to bring attention to that, which is why I talk about it constantly. It's not affecting me because, again, I'm a safe gay. Do I think that they'll eventually come, once they get done with their mission to get rid of trans voices or Black queer voices, do I think that they'll come for the rest of us? Absolutely. But we have to protect every single voice, because every single voice in our community matters. It's not just about my voice. It should not be just about my voice. It should be about all members of our community getting to have the same journey that I get to have. It should be about the same opportunities. And we have to protect our community. We have to, because look, man, there's books on that list. There's a book on that list called Flamer by Mike Curato. Have anybody heard of that? Yes. Okay. Flamer by Mike Curato. It is a graphic novel that uses color very, very sparingly, but it is one of the most transformational works. If I had had that book when I was a queer kid, so many things would have been different for me. And of course, that means it's one of the most banned books in the United States. It's never been about protecting the children. If it was about protecting the children, if we think that children today are smarter, savvier, more worldly, more empathetic than we ever were at their age. Younger people are coming up in a world where they have never known a world that didn't have immediate access to information. And they use that information. And they see their books being taken away from their schools. They see their trans classmates getting targeted. They see laws are being enacted in states that are preventing trans kids from playing sports. When it's just one kid trying to play sports, an entire state is making laws to affect just one person. Trans people are like 1% of the population, and yet you would think that they're the harbingers of the end of the world. But that's not how it is. So I have this platform, and what I use it to do is to make sure that everybody knows that this banned book thing is happening still to this day. Your librarians, maybe they don't have to deal with it as much here, but I've been to libraries where they have to deal with that all the time. I was at a library, I was telling them backstage, I was at a library where some random guy, not wanting to expose children to LGBTQ books, went into their pride display and checked out every single book on the pride display, not realizing the librarians are like, hell yeah, circulation, let's put more books out on display on that. See, again, revenge. So it's important that we continue to have those discussions, but for me, physically, no, my books have not been targeted very, very much at all. And it makes you wonder why. Thank you for that question. Next question.
This isn't really a question, but what you were just saying brought back the words of Martin Luther King. No one is free until we are all free.
Mhm.
And that sort of resonated with me, what you were saying. That, you know, first they came for the black trans authors,
Mhm.
but you didn't speak up because you weren't a black trans author. Then they came for, and so what that says to me is that we all need to speak up. And also, you know, since Martin Luther King's birthday just passed, it made me think of that. So thank you.
Thank you. And I want to be very clear about something too, something that I've noticed. And look, when we talk about people with beliefs that are different than us, and then we talk about people without horrid beliefs, where they believe that, say, I'll just, because I can speak for this community, they can say for queer people are somehow lesser. They should not be allowed the same rights or the same protections that everybody else is allowed. And I see that kind of anger and that kind of vitriol, and I think sometimes to myself, why is it up to us to have to be the ones to change their minds? Why does it have to be up to us to be the ones to change their minds? Because we believe them to be trapped in echo chambers of this kind of information. But isn't this kind of an echo chamber too? If you think about it, this is kind of an echo chamber too, because I highly doubt there's anybody in here who's like, I don't think trans people should exist. And if you do think that, get the fuck out of here, because I don't want you here. But I want to make sure that we understand that it has to be more than just sitting in this room and talking about it. You know, it has to be more. You actually have to go out into the world and hope to make change. Change can't be done by just sitting around and talking about it. Change has to be done on a community level. It has to be done on a bigger level. And I really hope, I absolutely hope, I'm not going to tell you if you see like a MAGA flag no, but if you see somebody being a victim of bigotry, if you see somebody being homophobic, if you see somebody being racist, speak up, man. I know that the intention or the reaction might be to freeze, because that's happened to me before, where you hear somebody say something so out of pocket and you freeze because you're like, oh, I don't know how to react to that. But we should have to react to that. We should call that crap out, because the crazier people get, nobody's telling them to shut up, man. Nobody's told J.K. Rowling to shut up yet. And I'm like, Jesus Christ, somebody take away her phone. What the hell? But it's the thing, we can't, why is it up to us to fix them? Well, because, crap, man, nobody else is going to do it. Nobody else is going to try to go out and talk to people. I went and did a book club with a Southern Baptist church. And I went into that thinking, holy crap, they want to read The House in the Cerulean Sea, and they wanted me to come talk to them about the book? This is deep in COVID during pandemic time. So I was like, okay, I guess I can appear online to this Southern Baptist church who's probably going to be like, why do they have to be homosexual? But it was literally row after row of white women in their 80s and their 90s, and there was the kindest group of people I had ever met, except for one, but that's another story. But it just showed that my whole preconceived notions, my own biases, even as a 40-something queer person who's grown up in the shit, can have biases, and it's still absolutely possible. And part of my growing process is trying to admit that and dismantle it and do the best I can. I figure if I put out a little bit of good out into the world each and every single day, you know what? I'm doing my best. And if I can't do it every single day, at least I'm trying to do something better. I'm trying to be a better person than I was the day before. Do I always succeed? No, look at me. But I try. I still try. And I hope that everybody here will keep on trying. Do me a favor, seriously. If you see people being just cruel for the sake of being cruel, I don't know what you have to do. I don't know if you want to mace them or tell them to shut the hell up, whatever. Just speak up, because you never know when somebody needs you to speak up for them. How do you do that? Question up here.
Make sure it's working. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Klune.
Oh, no, it's okay. I promise you, I am not cool in any way, shape, or form.
I'm a 50-plus white woman who is married. I'm
Thank you.
Okay.
I do have a question.
Okay.
I have to compose myself.
Okay.
Sorry. Okay, so I changed my career. I was a librarian, not a public librarian, but I was a librarian for a long time. And in my late 40s, I changed career. And I love it. I'm a potter. And I look at the stuff that I made 7 years ago and I cringe.
Wow.
And I suffer. I'm still learning to deal with the imposter syndrome.
Oh, yeah.
Have you seem to be pretty okay with yourself, and you have a great speaking voice, and you've reached all of us, I think. Have you ever?
Every single day of my GD life. So, I wrote my first book when I was in my 20s. It was my first book ever published. It's called Bear, Honor, and the Kid. It came out with an indie publisher in 2011, and for some reason, it did well. It was picked up by, like, Amazon named it one of the best books of the year, or something like that. I can't look at that book. I cannot go back to that book. When people bring that book, now that I'm out in the world a lot more and people are seeing, people bring my old books to them and they ask me to sign. I'm like, oh no, I didn't know what I was doing. But then at the same time, I realize I'm my own harshest critic. Obviously with imposter syndrome, you are going to be your own harshest critic. And trust me, you're never going to find a creative that's never been in your shoes at one point or another. But here's the thing, I've told myself, I want to create art. Nobody is going to create art the way I would create art. Therefore, there would be a void in the world of TJ Klune art. So I want to put my art out into the world. So you have your own art that you want to put out into the world, and nobody else is doing it the way you do it. So don't you owe it to yourself and the world to do it? So that's what you got to do. I'll tell you, every time I start a new book, I freak out because I've written 30 plus of these things, and I freak out going, what if I forgot how to do this? I'm about to drop a bomb in this room. I just started writing the third and final House in the Cerulean Sea book last month, and I didn't know what I was doing. I found out what I'm doing, and by the way, that book is amazing. That wasn't what I was going to say, but I'm trying to hype myself over. I was going to say that book is years off. I like the 4-year gap between 2020 and the sequel, and another 4-year gap. But I can tell you this because I announced it when I was on my tour. I haven't posted about it yet, but I can talk about this. There will be one final book. It is set 5 years later. The main character is Lucy. And it deals with one side of the adoption and foster system that I never got to touch. What happens when your real dad comes back? Who's Lucy's real dad? Oh my God! So, man, it would be really funny if I told you the title. I mean, I know it. I could just say the words right. No, I'm not going to. So yes, you can fight your imposter syndrome, and the thing is, like with my ADHD, it's one of those things where even now, when I start writing a new book and I sit down, I'm like, holy crap, do I know how to do this? Yes, I do. And do I sometimes have to psych myself up a little bit more to get to that point? Yeah, I do. But again, I remember, nobody's going to do this kind of thing but me, this kind of story but me. And don't I owe it to myself to do it, because this is what I want to do. You're welcome. Thank you. Good luck with you. Good. You say, oh yeah, hi, back there, I see you.
Hi. First of all, as a queer 18-year-old with anxiety, thank you.
You're welcome. I'm a queer 42-year-old with anxiety. Trust me, when you get to be 42 as well, your anxiety will still be there, but you'll be like, I don't give a fuck.
So as any person who likes books, I like to quote things to make me sound smart.
Yeah.
Toni Morrison said, if there's a book you really want to read and it hasn't been written, you must write it.
Yep.
Is that how you feel when you're writing sometimes with?
Absolutely, absolutely. So look, I alluded to it earlier, but I'll kind of go into it a little bit more. I wrote a book called In the Lives of Puppets that came out in 2023. It was a queer retelling of Pinocchio, but it involved androids and machines with their one human counterpart. The reason this book exists is because I bought a Roomba vacuum cleaner. And what happens when humans do stuff like this, when we buy things? Humans have this funny little quirk where we tend to anthropomorphize or give human-like qualities to inhuman things. Think about it. When you name your car, or when you do something along those lines. So what did I do when I got this Roomba vacuum? I put googly eyes on him. And I named him Hank. Now, when you get a Roomba vacuum cleaner, what happens when you first get them is you turn them on so they can map out your house, so they know where to go. This stupid little machine got stuck in a corner and made the saddest beeping sound I have ever heard a machine make. And from there, I was like, hold on a second. Because what if this was a Roomba vacuum cleaner, but what if he was real, and what if he was a character, and what if he had social anxiety? And what if he was like part of this family? Okay, but wait, he couldn't be the main character because I want the main character to be human, and the humans are gonna be the one that is gonna be leading the story. But if there's a human raised by machines, that means there'd have to be some kind of nursing machine or a doctor. Okay, but what if she was a sociopath? And that's how that happens. Yes, I know. So basically, you just sat with me for the 10-second genesis of the book of In the Lives of Puppets because I bought a vacuum cleaner. Inspiration comes from the weirdest and dumbest places. You can make up stories out of absolutely the weirdest possible thing. The reason I'm writing The House in the Cerulean Sea third book right now is because when I was at San Diego Comic-Con, I thought I saw a red phone booth sitting in a corner. It was not a red phone booth. It was a person. But in my head, I had this idea of a red phone booth, and then all of a sudden, I began to build this story around it. Well, I can't tell you about it because I'm writing it right now. But inspiration comes from the weirdest and most wonderful places, and I think that's what your question was about. Okay, next. Oh, right here.
Have you ever been approached about movie rights?
Oh boy.
Your stories?
Oh boy.
I think this would make a great movie.
Is Kurt Graves here? Kurt Graves. Oh, hi Kurt. Okay, so see Kurt right there? He's my audio narrator. If you know, not for House in the Cerulean Sea, he did the Green Creek series. He did In the Lives of Puppets. No, not In the Lives of Puppets. Under the Whispering Door. Under the Whispering Door. And I just wanted to point you out because you're famous and I love you. So, let's clap for him. So, I'm going to tell you this flat out. Books to movies, it rarely happens. It very rarely happens. And when they do happen, it's probably retreads of things that we've seen before. I mean, how many times are they going to redo Lord of the Rings things? We already have a perfect trilogy. You don't need to be doing anything more than that. Or they're relaunching, oh, God forgive us, they're relaunching Harry Potter as a TV show for HBO because those movies apparently didn't end just like 10 years ago or whatever. So, but when they do go successful novel to television or film or television show, it's usually like a romance or a rom-com. Why? Because those are cheaper and easier to film. You don't really get to see big fantasy epics of books that I think could be made. I mean, hell, I think The House in the Cerulean Sea would be an amazing Studio Ghibli film. I mean, that's just me. I think House in the Cerulean Sea would be amazing, like Leica Studio, the way they do the 3D stop motion puppets. I think that would be cool. I can say The House in the Cerulean Sea was with a certain mouse house for many years. They wanted to turn it into a 10-episode television show, and I said, not everything needs to be a movie, or not everything needs to be a television show. Why can't we just make it a movie? And they said, well, we're going to hold on to it for 3 years and not do anything with it. And then I took the rights back. I still got that Disney money, but I took the rights back. And now we are carefully finding the right partner for this. And I am very excited about who we're speaking with. And I can say that hopefully something will come of it, but it might not. Books They get bought, the rights get bought, and then they disappear into the ether. Hell, you'd think Stephen King would have a book made from every single one of his movies for how successful it is. It doesn't happen. And when it does happen, raise your hand if you've ever watched a movie and thought to yourself, that was better than the book. A couple of times it's happened, but to me it just doesn't ever feel right. If it happens, it happens. I will say, to end on a brighter note, there's one of my books that project is really far along, and you'll have an announcement, I'm assuming, soon. And if you will never be able to guess the people who are behind it and what it's doing, but I will say that maybe a Roomba vacuum with social anxiety is so much closer than you all think. Because that's getting made. All that to say, adaptations are very hard to have happen. It's waiting game. Okay, where are we at with the microphones over here? Okay, let's go with this side first.
Hello, first of all, hi.
Hi!
I am a huge fan of House in the Cerulean Sea. I actually found out about this book through a book club a couple of years ago, and I fell in love with it. It's one of my all-time favorites. But my question, so I have two littles at home, and I'm so captured by the artwork of this book and the sequel, and then the Under the Whispering Door has very similar artwork as well. So I was wondering, have you ever been interested in writing a children's book for like young, very young, like preschool, kind of, with this type of artwork? Because it's just so fantastic.
So this artwork, I want to give credit where credit's due. That is Chris Sickles of Red Nose Studios, who does the covers for most of my books. Those are all handmade, real 3D things. In the House in the Cerulean Sea, if you look at that cover, you'll see the sky and the ocean and the sun. He hand-built everything. And then he takes photographs of it, and that's how you get what this is here. If you've seen the cover for Under the Whispering Door, it has the quirky tea shop that spins up in a different direction. I have that tea shop sitting at my house. He gifted that to me. When you press a button at the bottom, the 4th floor lights up where the eponymous door is. Hugo's scooter is sitting right out in front, and everything like that. He is one of the most talented individuals I have ever had the pleasure of working with. If you have Instagram, please follow Red Nose Studios, and you'll see his animation work and see some of the stuff that he does. And in fact, whenever I release a new book, he does a fly-through of the model he built for the cover. So you're able to see each and every single little piece and part that goes into it. No, I have not thought about writing for that young. However, I'm going to say something here that none of you can hold me to. But I have thought about something really cool. What if there was a graphic novel series spin-off of The House in the Cerulean Sea? It would be 6 stories long, and it would be Chauncey working at his own hotel where he'd be the bellhop. Wait. He'd be the bellhop, the concierge, and he'd also solve inconsequential mysteries. Each of the books would involve one of his brothers or sisters, and when a mystery happened, he would have to take off his bellhop cap and put on a Sherlock Holmes hat to go and solve the mystery. Wouldn't that be cool? Yeah. Is that exactly what you were talking about? Maybe I'll do that one. Yeah. We'll see. I've thought about that a lot, only because I want to see Chauncey take off his bellhop cap and put on a Sherlock Holmes hat and go, now it's time to solve the mystery. And then it'd be stupid things like, who stole the forks? I don't know. Chauncey's going to solve it. With the help from the Antichrist. Everybody. Okay, next. I think we have over here.
Hi, TJ.
Hello.
It's okay that I call you TJ.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right, well, first of all, I wanted to start before my question and just say, as someone who's queer and neurodivergent, I really just appreciate you using your voice and using your platform
Hell yeah, Sister
to
Fran,
really
that's what we
speak on
do.
things that really matter. I think in this climate, and I'm from here, so in Northeast Wisconsin specifically,
Yeah.
I think it really gives a lot of us the space and the courage to feel empowered to do the same. So just
Thank you
mention
for
that.
saying so. I appreciate that.
So for a little bit of context, like I said, queer, ADHD, diagnosed last year. And so I also struggle with anxiety a lot and working in the corporate space, not really loving it.
It's like you're my twin.
Yes.
That's how I used to be, yeah.
And I won't mention it, but I did bring one of your past novels, Tell Me It's Real, because that was
Oh my God, yes, I love it.
yeah, and that was the first book to kind of introduce me to your work. And so, you know, reading that story, and, you know, encountering Paul's journey and that path, that really started me reflecting on my own desire to, you know, want to write a novel. I've loved writing, been passionate about it for a really long time, but as someone with ADHD, you kind of talked about your routine a little bit and navigating that imposter syndrome. I was kind of curious if you would be willing to share maybe some small actionable steps for someone who wants to pursue their creative endeavors and get their characters and their queer stories out in the world that they want to tell.
Absolutely. So first and foremost, get yourself a copy of Stephen King's On Writing. It is the best writing book, How to Write. One half of it is a memoir that is absolutely delightful. The other half is the writing book. I'm on my 4th copy. I use that religiously. Second of all, you have to figure out what kind of stories you want to tell. Please do not chase trends. Do not think, oh, because this kind of book is popular now, that's what I want to write. If you go through the traditional process of getting an agent, then getting the book sold and getting traditionally published, that'll be 3-4 years away. Don't write to chase trends. If you happen to like a trend and you want to write a story and that put your own spin on it, absolutely, go ahead, but don't chase something because by the time you catch up to it, it'll be gone already for something else. Second, I live and die by outlines. I create massive outlines for my books. The House in the Cerulean Sea and Somewhere Beyond the Sea, the outline itself is probably 100,000 words just for the outline. The reason I do that, A, is because once I start, I don't want to stop, because once I get in the flow, those first 100 pages are the lead-up pages. Once I get to page 100, I know I'm doing good if I'm getting there and feeling fine about the story. But I make extensive outlines, not just to put, not for everything that goes in books. A lot of that stuff never goes into the books. I just put it in there for me. Characters' birthdays, what their favorite foods are, what they get scared of, all that kind of stuff. Second, if you've never considered this before, you want to get to be a better writer, write fan fiction. Let me tell you why. Fan fiction has already pre-built universes and worlds, and you could focus on something that is so important that so many people forget, dialogue. Dialogue, have you ever read a book, and even if it's a book that's set in the fantastical, and you read a line and you think, no human person would ever say that with their human mouths. That's not how we speak. I get that thrown out of me, I throw it out of books all the time because I read it, I'm like, no human talks like this. Practice your dialogue. In the framing of fan fiction, you already have that world created for you, so you can focus on how you think characters should move and talk and everything like that. And I heard a couple of scoffs when I brought up fan fiction. Don't poo-poo that, you literati snobs. Come on. Fan fiction is there for A, queer people to be able to write themselves in a canon that doesn't exist for them, and to B, for burgeoning writers to get better at that. See, your outline should not be a set-in-stone document. It should be a living document that you can update as you go along. Because you might get partway through a story and think, oh shit, this is a really cool idea, but now I have to start over from the beginning. I've done that before. And lastly, I want to go back to the dialogue thing real quick. Something I do that helps me. I read all my dialogue out loud. When I write a chapter or finish a book, when I'm in that first draft editing process, I will read my dialogue out loud so it actually sounds like a person. I don't want it to sound like me. I want it to sound like a person actually speaking. Please avoid one easy thing. How many times when you're in conversation with somebody do you say their name? Never, right? You never say somebody's name. Why do some authors put the names of the people they're having conversations with over? I know what you are, Ted. What am I, Wanda? You know what you are, Ted. What do you need, Wanda? I don't know, Ted. This is what it is, Wanda. Don't do that! That's so bad. Nobody says names that many times. Stop it! Hope that helps.
Thank you.
So first of all, thank you for not writing women like a damn creep.
Well, here's the thing. I never understood this thing, why male writers have a hard time writing women without seeing them as sexual objects. A, you write them as people. Women are people. I mean, come on, man.
Thank you so much. I feel so validated.
Yeah.
That's a good reason. How do you go about researching for groups of people that you can't directly relate to when there's so much misinformation out
Yeah,
there?
absolutely. So I talk to actual people involved in communities that I want to talk about. I want to tell you a time that it didn't work out, so people can understand. In the lives of puppets, I had this idea. I'm neurodiverse. Under the neurodiverse umbrella also falls autism. I am not a person with autism, so therefore I cannot speak for the autistic community. But I wondered what it would be like if a person like the main character, one raised by machines, would still be so bursting with life that his humanity is undeniable, because there's a harmful stereotype that people with autism act like machines. So I wanted to subvert that trope and show that. So what did I do? I spent months and months talking to people with autism, talking to parents of children with autism, talking to children with autistic parents, talking with medical professionals who treat autism, listening to podcasts by, for, and about people with autism, just so I could understand what I was doing. After that, what I do, and this is something I really hope that most writers will do, especially when they're writing outside of their wheelhouse or their knowledge base, is I hire sensitivity readers. Sensitivity readers are people within the community that I am writing about that can give that kind of feedback to say, hey, you're being really offensive here, or B, this is not what it's actually like. And I never want my beta or my sensitivity readers to feel like I didn't do my homework, I didn't do my job, because I want to make sure that I'm writing with respect and with the measure of again, respect that these people are owed. So I did all of that. I wrote the book. 3 sensitivity readers were hired. 2 thought it was the best representation they had ever seen by a non-autistic person and said, yes, you had obviously done your homework. The 3rd person said it was the most offensive thing they'd ever read. So, who do you listen to at that point? You have 3 people, 2 of which are people with autism. 3rd person is also a person with autism. So who is right? Well, I can't make everybody happy, right? So then you have to make the decision, could it hurt more than it helps? I didn't think it did. So I got mad. I was like, well, maybe she misunderstood what I was trying to do with this. These other 2 people are, but then I thought, I can't get mad. I hired her to do what she did. She told me she was doing this. This is what we hired her to do. So I can't get mad at her. Who can I be upset with? Well, myself. I'm the one who wrote the book. So I removed the words autism from the book. I removed Victor, the main character's scenes of showing him stimming, where he was showing him at being a person with autism. I never, ever, ever want to be coy about anything I'm putting on page, because that's not fair. However, I left bits and pieces in that book just enough that I've had more autistic readers reach out to me about that character than any other, and all of them were like, thank you for putting him in. Now, does that mean that that sensitivity reader was wrong? No, absolutely not. Because she said something that stuck out to me. There may be some people that find this book empowering, but all people with autism aren't a monolith. There will be people who might be hurt by this. She can't say for sure. So you have to decide then, is art worth the risk? What kind of chances do you want to take? Maybe one day I'll pick a different fight and decide I want to go in a different direction and push back. But in this one, I listened. So that just shows you sometimes that even your best intentions aren't good enough for people who it should be for. Because again, she's in that community, I am not, and therefore she was right and I was not. So that's why I changed. So sometimes you listen, but yes, I try to do as much research as I possibly can to avoid situations like that. I don't want to hire a sensitivity reader and have them look at a book and go, did you do any research about names or backgrounds or anything like that? I never want that to happen. That's why research often takes me much longer than a book actually takes to write. Thank you for the question. How are we doing on time? We're good? One more question. One more question, then I'll finish this by telling you a story. And you will love it.
Okay. Hi.
Hi.
Big fan. Thank you for being here.
Absolutely.
Door County, it's crazy.
Oh, yeah.
So, recently we had to write an essay in English class about a character who rebels, and I kind of panicked and I chose Linus.
Okay.
Obviously not the most stereotypically rebellious character that you think of.
But I see where you're coming from, absolutely.
And I argue that the biggest, most important act of rebellion that he did was seeing the children as human.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of stumbled across that, but I wanted to hear what your opinion on it was. Like, do you think that the dehumanization of people,
Marginalized groups specifically,
is like
yeah.
the biggest issue? Is that something you specifically meant to touch on in your books, or is that like just a side effect of it?
Absolutely. So when you think of fantasy heroes, you don't think of a fat, fussy man in his 40s who's a mid-level bureaucrat. That's not who you think of as a stereotypical hero. Linus is very unassuming, and his acts of rebellion are very small acts. Remember in the house in the Cerulean Sea, at the very end of the book, he was misplacing certain files to take along with him, and you'll see how that goes on into Somewhere Beyond the Sea. But that's how it starts, though. As Arthur says, it's the voices joining together, a whisper becoming a roar. And those tiny little acts of rebellion, those tiny little things lead to something bigger, but they also show to the kids that this is what people are willing to do for us. We know what people are willing to do to us. We've survived that. But now we're seeing what people are willing to do for us. And that kind of thing reverberates. You know, it's mentioned in the sequel, but think of it like throwing a rock into a pond. You have those concentric circles. You have that first little action, and then there's constant reactions that trickle out from that. And that's what I think about. So those tiny little acts of rebellion can lead to something world-changing. It just has to start somewhere. Thank you for that question. That was lovely. Okay, so to wrap this up, I want to tell you guys something. You remember when I mentioned the Southern Baptist Church? How I went into that with my biases absolutely skewed, because I thought they were going to be like, how dare you write about this and this and this and this and this. And it turned out to be a lovely time. However, I did mention there was one person. So I want you to imagine you log in, this is deep in the pandemic, and you log in, and you see row after elderly white women staring back at you, and all of them are smiling and welcoming except for one. She's in the top right corner. She doesn't speak the entire time. She just glares the whole time, not saying a word. So after this hour-long book discussion, I logged off thinking, I guess I didn't really know the first thing about this Southern Baptist Church. I bet I'll never hear from them again. Wrong. The next day I get an email. Guess who from? Top right-hand corner lady. She was very upset. Why was she upset? Well, she told me in a very long email, paragraph after paragraph, telling me, how dare you put the Antichrist in this book? How dare I include the character of the Antichrist? Did I not know who the Antichrist was? Did I not know what the Antichrist was capable of? Did I not know what the Antichrist was prophesied to do? And while she did come to care about 6-year-old Lucy, she wished I'd gone in a different direction. And then she ended the email with the most badass sign-off line you could imagine. So much so that I used this sign-off in emails to my friends. So remember, after taking me to task for being very upset that I included the Antichrist and going on and on about how horrible it was, she ended the email by saying, but I did not mind the homosexuals. Thank you.